Hi folks, welcome to this video on 19th century English public schools. We're looking at popular recreation and rational recreation. So we're going to look at a few different things in this video, but it's all about the impact of the English public school system on modern day sport, okay? So in order to do that, we're going to go right back to the start. What was it like before the English public schools did their thing with their certain activities? Well, the vast majority of people in the country were working class. They came from farming backgrounds. We didn't have cities as we know it. And the only kind of sport or activity that they did were popular recreation or mob games, okay? And we've got a picture of a mob game or popular recreation here. So what can we say about these mob games? Well, they were played by the working classes only. The reason it was called popular recreation is not because it was, good or anything like that. It's because at these times, where we're looking at this picture here, okay, like the lightsaber again, at these times you've got 98%, let's say, of the population working on farms, okay, not for very much money and working very long hours. The top 2% are the upper classes, the people who own the land, own the farms. So these are sports played by the working classes. How else do we know this? How else can we sum it up? Well, as you can see, they're violent. These are violent times. I got sick of my lightsaber, by the way. These are violent times. These are harsh times. These are times when there are public executions taking place. There are no written rules. Why? Because the high levels of illiteracy. There's no point in having written rules because most of these people can't. Well, all of these people can read. They can't read or write. Sorry. As a result, there are no fixed numbers, time limits, or boundaries. So you play it for as long as it takes, with however many people you've got over which space you've got to play it in. Because these people work on farms, they don't get paid very much. Because there are no laws surrounding working conditions, they don't get much time off. So the only time they can play these fixtures are on public holidays, Shrove Tuesday, Bank Holiday Mondays, things like that. So not very often at all. And always associated with gambling and alcoholism and highly immoral. Hence why this monk, this priest, this bishop, whatever you want to call him, looks absolutely horrified by what he is seeing taking place in the streets. What I should also say is, obviously, we're looking at an old picture, 19th century. Don't forget, the 19th century is the 1800s. Okay, it's not the 1900s, we're talking about the 1800s. But these games, you might be thinking they were, even for then they were in old clothes for the 1800s. These mob games have been going on since the 1400s, and these conditions haven't changed in all that time. Okay, so they're the characteristics of mob games, also known as popular recreation. So public schools, now these have also been in existence for centuries, but we are bringing it up to the 1800s, the 19th century again. Now this is a picture of Eton as it is now, but Eton's looked like that again for centuries. First thing I will say is this: even though we are using that term public, these are not schools for the public, okay? They were the only schools at the time, hence why they were called public, but they're not for the public at all. What can we say about them then? So like we said, even though the public schools, they're not for the public, they are for the upper classes only. You might be thinking, well, what about education for the working classes and the middle classes? There wasn't such a thing. Not until 1896 do we start to see state schools coming in. So, schools for working class people. So these schools are set up for people like this, okay? The sons and then later the daughters of the elite in society. They are fee paying and very expensive. They are elitist, upper class only. Initially only for boys. Girls were let into public schools until relatively recently. When you look at how long they've been in existence, they're also boarding schools. So these boys would stay. They would go in, at the start of term, and that would be until Christmas, and then go back again until the summer. So they're spending a lot more time at school than they are at home with the family. But that was part of the point. And the other part of the point is this term here, the fagging system. What does that mean? Well, we've got a couple of things. We've got fags and we've got prefects. Okay, I'm not misspelling perfect. Fags, well, so let's say, if we think of it this way, prefects, sixth formers. Okay, if you want to think of it that way, 16 to 18 years old. Fags, less than 16 years old. Why y'all put that? 16 years old. So in this situation here, he's the fag, he's the prefect. What is this fagging system all about? It was really the job of the prefects to order the fag around, teach them responsibility, teach them discipline and obedience, and teach them respect, okay, for your elders. Learn your place in life. And that's what I'm saying about the boarding schools. The point was that you went away from home to learn to become a man, to look after yourself, to stand up for yourself, to develop morals and things like that. But as a result, okay, these older children would bully the younger children because there's no parental supervision. Things like that are going to take place. So they're the characteristics of the public schools, in particular during the 19th century, i.e. the 1800s. Now, what is the relevance of this 19th century part? If these public schools have been in existence for hundreds of years, what is the relevance of the 19th century part? Well, as things develop and as times go on, things and attitudes start to change. Initially, the attitude towards recreation, towards activity, by the teachers at these schools is it's an absolute waste of time. Okay, there's nothing that can be learnt from it, and if you've got time to be doing physical activity, you should be spending that time to study instead. And don't forget, the only activity at the time are mob games. Okay, the things that the working classes are playing, and the upper classes don't want to associate with the working classes, don't want to be seen doing the same kind of activities as them. However, something starts to change. Because these boys are at boarding school and because the supervision isn't great, these boys get up to quite a bit of mischief. Just because they're upper class doesn't mean the saintly and godly, the children at the end of the day. So there's an issue surrounding this idea of social control. What these boys are actually doing on the evenings and on weekends is they're using the fagging system, which is leading to high levels of bullying, i.e. it's immoral. They're gambling, they're poaching, they're hunting, they're trespassing. Remember, they are the sons and their later daughters of the elite. They've got lots of money. They think they're above the law. So they're doing all these activities. And there's a couple of things it's doing. It's bringing a bad name to their schools and dragging their names through the dirt. And it's also teaching them things that are not, or teaching them attitudes and qualities that are not befitting of upper class people. These upper class people are going to become the next generation of politicians, army generals, leaders of the church, leaders of industry. Okay, so these are all unwholesome activities. So what is one way we can try and develop and improve our social control? Well, what we can do is this. We can do something called rational recreation. Now, what is that a term for? What the hell does that mean? We've come from popular recreation, which is your mob games, to something called rational recreation. So what happens is the teachers at these schools, but most importantly the boys themselves, started to do something very important to these mob games. They started to take this and turn it into this. Now this is rational recreation. Taking mob games, taking these popular recreational activities, okay, and turning them into proper sports. Okay, now what is rational recreation? There's a little way to remember this. Remember your R's, stick with the R's. So what is rational recreation? It's taking these mob games and giving them rules and regulations. It's playing them every week. So it's making them regular. It's giving people positions or roles and responsibilities. Okay? Because the upper classes are playing them, it's immediately making these sports or these games respectable. And finally, over time, it's playing sports against other schools, and it's turning these sports into regional games. Remember, these were played in local villages. You You didn't wander very far, you didn't have access to transport, you didn't have the money to pay for transport, you just played with whoever's there. These are upper class people, they can afford to travel. So what is rational recreation? It's turning the mob games into that. Look what's happening here. Here, you're in a village, okay, there's buildings, there's no kits, there's people getting caught up in it, there seems to be kicking and grabbing and punching, you probably can run with a ball in your hands. Come to this one over here, look. We've got a goal. We've got a goalkeeper, so there's positions there. We've got kits, people in different kits. We're playing in front of that church tower, so we're getting time limits and things like that. This is actually a picture of the first ever England-Scotland football match, but it's played by English and Scottish public school boys. So the first ever international game of football in this country was played between public school boys. So if you ever get a question on rational recreation, that's it there. That's what the public school boys did. And they didn't do it until the 19th century. You talk about 1850s, 1860s, something along those lines. So like I said, to recap, you know, the teachers at the schools didn't want the boys engaging in these types of activities because it's not teaching them very good things in life. Think back to that last slide we looked at. By doing this, we teach them important characteristics in life, and we're going to look at some of that now. Now, what we've got, there were originally 9 public schools, okay, for the, you know, to educate the future leaders of society, the working class elite. Here's an example of 3 of them: Eton, Charterhouse and Rugby. Now, as you can see, what they're doing is they're taking mob football and rationalise it in their own ways. Eton had a game called the Eton Wall game. They still play it as a form of tradition, where it's basically a big rugby scrum up and down a wall with a zone that you've got to get to at either end. Rugby had a running and throwing, you know, hands only, where you could tackle and grab a punch, but you could only pass the ball backwards kind of game. And Charterhouse turned mob football into a game where you could only kick the ball. So what you've got is you've got 3 different schools rationalising the rules to mob football in 3 different ways. Now, what are these, you know, we ultimately end up with these 2 coming together and making rugby and that becoming football. But why? What's the point in it? What are these kind of sports, what are these kind of activities teaching the boys that they weren't getting from mob football? Well, by playing these sports, you're developing, move that back, sorry, you're developing all this in the boys. They're learning discipline, how to follow rules, to have courage, to play fair, to play with honour, to have integrity, to be competitive. Who are these boys? They are the future leaders of society. They need these principles. You are not going to teach these principles by playing mob games. You're going to develop and teach these principles by playing structured and organised sports. Okay? Now I'm just going to very briefly move these over here a second, because as you can probably tell, the problem is, as it stands right now, Eton have got their game, Charterhouse have got theirs, Rugby have got theirs, but these schools can't play each other in competitions yet because they're all playing by a different set of rules, which is a bit of a problem. However, what happens, and again, this isn't in the space of a year or 2 years. They were talking years and years of development to get to this stage. What happens is all these boys, when they've graduated from public school, all go to one of 2 places. They're all going to go to Oxford or Cambridge University. Why? Is it just because they're elite? Well, yeah, but also because they're the only 2 universities around at this time. There's only 9 public schools, so you don't need as many universities as we have today. Why are Oxford and Cambridge the most prestigious? Because they've been around the longest. They've educated the brightest minds, some of the brightest minds that the world's ever known. So these boys are all going to go to either Oxford or Cambridge to continue with their degree studies. Now these boys are then going to meet each other and start discussing the sports they played when they were at public school and their public schools. And what's going to happen is a process called codification. Okay? Now codification is similar to rational recreation. Okay? Rational recreation is giving these mob games rules, but as you can see, it can happen in lots of different ways. What codification is, when these boys all meet together, they can all come up with universal rules. Right, from now on, when we play this rugby game, we're going to introduce scrums, like what we had at Eton. Okay, and we're going to have the rule where you can only pass backwards, so we'll have that as, 2 fundamental rules of rugby. And we'll have a separate game on its own, where you can only kick the ball, and we'll call that football. And that's what took place at Oxford and Cambridge University. And you'll sometimes hear the phrase melting pot. What was the melting pot effect? All these boys went to Oxford and Cambridge, threw all their ideas on how to play these sports into a melting pot, and they cooked up the rules for these sports that we now know and play ourselves, over a century later, century and a half later. But what else did these ex-public school boys, now university students, do? They set up all the national governing bodies we see today. When we had this game of football, the rules were written down for it, we'd codified it, we then had to set up the FA, the Football Association, to govern the sport from now on. When we had rugby set up, we had to set up the Rugby Football Union. When we organised cricket, we had to set up the English Cricket Board. Okay, so that also took place. And again, I know I'm talking through it in a matter of minutes. This took years, and it wasn't the first generation of public school boys to do this. Far from it. It took years and years to develop. Just really quickly as well, you might be, why did I change it to blue? There was a reason behind why this is blue. When these boys went to Oxford or Cambridge, if they represented Oxford or Cambridge in sports, they were awarded their university's colours. And I think I'm right in saying Cambridge are the light blues and Oxford are the dark blues. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not really Oxford or Cambridge educated. But if you go it went to either of these, you would have awarded your university colours, okay? Hence why, so if you ever asked the role of the Oxford or Cambridge Blues, what were their roles? Their role was to codify these sports, develop these national governing bodies, okay? Right, so finally then, we've gone from mob games only, no proper sport in this country, to sort of sports at school where each school is playing by its own set of rules, which is rational recreation, and then the next stage is to go to university, and then there was codification, which once you've got that, you can then have leagues, tournaments, competitions, etc., etc. So how does sport then spread from the upper class elite in England down to the working classes, but also ultimately across the world? Remember, this wasn't taking place in other countries. This is unique to England. This is unique to the UK. Well, it follows on from what the boys did after university. So they've gone to the public schools, they've gone to university, they've got some certain places that they are going to go after that. And here are 4 of those places where they're going to go on to after university. They're going to go into the army, not as soldiers, they're going to go in straight as officers. 21, 22 years old, I'm going to go straight in as an officer. Why? Because I'm educated, okay? I have tactics, I'm literate, I can, use my numeracy skills, I have knowledge of geography and history and all this kind of stuff. So you had very young officers and generals going into the army. Now, not a very nice picture, let's be honest, a part of our past that we are not very proud of at all. We also had the British Empire, okay? Which is what that picture is representing. So, a lot of our army is being sent overseas. For example, in this picture, it's parts of India and Asia, okay, but South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. Now, the West Indies, what are the common things are in between all these countries? Well, think about sports like cricket and rugby, things like that. Why are they common, or why are they popular, in those countries? Well, as our officers went across there, they would take their sports with them that they did at school and they did at university. As an army officer, in charge of a lot of working class soldiers, I would teach them sports in order to improve their discipline, in order to improve their health and fitness, in order to teach them fair play and rules and honour and courage, just as it was taught to me at school. So straight away, you've got the sport moving from the elite upper classes, the officers, to the working classes, the soldiers. Okay? Equally, people in India are going to see these sports played, see this weird game of cricket. Look at that, what the hell's going on there? They're chucking a ball and they're hitting it with a piece of wood. Okay, what's that all about? And they're going to watch it and they're going to copy it. Okay, because it looks interesting, it looks fun, it looks enjoyable. Hence why, one of the reasons why sport now starts to spread globally. Some of these ex-public school boys are going to go into the church at that time, the church is big business. Okay, everyone goes to church on a Sunday. It's I know it's a religious institution, but it's a big business as well. Okay, what are they going to do? They're going to set up Sunday school teams. Why? Again, you've got a working class population coming to church. They're ill-disciplined, they're disobedient, okay, they have no honour in your eyes, they're not fit and healthy. Well, if I start playing sport, that's going to reverse all that. It's also going to lead to something called muscular Christianity. What is muscular Christianity? It's a concept that ex-public school boys loved. A healthy body and a healthy mind to serve God. That is what we need to teach people. That is what we need to push on these working class people. So that's another reason why the churches were initially very reluctant to do sport. The reason being, if you've got time for sport, you should be spending more time in church praying for your sins, things like that. Sport's a waste of time, which was the public school's initial opinion on sport. But as they saw the importance of it, what could be taught through sport, they were willing to adopt it as well. Okay? I should also just quickly say, muscular Christianity is very close to this concept of athleticism. Goodness, manliness, courage, bravery, physical endeavour and moral integrity. They're key phrases. Physical endeavour, play hard and play fair. Okay? That's what it was about. And moral integrity are all your truthfulness, honour, dignity, all those kind of things. So we've got the army, we've got the church, but what did some of these boys do after graduating from University of Cambridge, Oxford University or Cambridge University? They would go back and teach. They would go become school teachers themselves. So they would teach sport to next generation. And because they knew all the rules inside out, they would teach to a higher standard and coach to a higher standard. So that would lead to this starting to develop of elite sport, high standard sports performers, which is very, very important. You've got, there's your typical example of a public school teacher there, mortarboard and cap, used to wear them all the time. Okay? And finally, we're out of space, but we'll have enough. You've got industry, okay, which is what this picture here is representing, factories. These boys would not, having gone to Oxford and Cambridge, would not go and work on the factory floor. They would go straight in and run and own and manage these factories. Okay, so people that we now call industrialists. People who run the industries. Okay, what are they going to do? They're going to set up works teams, leagues. The reason being, again, I'm the owner of the factory, but I've got working class people working for me. They're not fit and healthy. They lack teamwork. They lack cooperation. They lack discipline. If I teach them sport, or I give them opportunity to take part in sport, that will increase the productivity. So sometimes it wasn't a generous thing they're trying to do. Oh, I'm going to give you some sport because I'm nice. It was a case of this will drive up profits, okay, by doing sport with them, okay. This will make our army more efficient and we'll be able to gain more territory, okay. Weirdly, this will bring more money into our church because if there's more people coming to play sport, that means more donations, all right. So, it's not just out of the kindness of their heart that they bring in sport. There's always a motive behind it, but that's how it starts to spread across all sectors of society and across all parts of the country.